Because once your life is at risk, you can't even think straight. You cannot live. You cannot thrive. You cannot be creative. You cannot contribute to the society. You can only contribute when you are alive. So people's lives were at risk. People started leaving. And SARS happened. A lot of people were at risk. People died from that situation, and people started living where people can be free. It's like being on exile. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are doing well and keeping safe. So if this is your first time on my channel, my name is Chichi FA and I make a lot of videos on lifestyle, motherhood, travel, as well as cooking. Today we're bringing a very different video. This is going to actually be part of my travel series. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for visiting the channel once again. And if you're new here and this is content you like, please definitely consider subscribing down below. So today you can tell from the title what we're going to be discussing, and it brings me a lot of pain to be discussing this topic because my country, Nigeria, is very close to my heart, and I never thought I would ever Japa, as they say. So Japa means is a word in the Yoruba language. Yoruba language is one of the dominant languages in Nigeria, and the meaning of the word means to run or to flee. For decades now, we've actually had people Japaring, and that means people leaving the country. Different schools of thoughts had called it brain drain. People leaving the country, professionals leaving the country to other parts of the world, thereby causing a brain drain in the country Nigeria. So this brain drain literally started decades ago, right? So the era I actively remember was when I was in my early teens. I was a medical doctor at the time, and he had jackpot because back then there was a brain drain of medical doctors leaving the country. But as I said, we've had different eras of the Japa season coming. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and my dad was in the army, and I basically grew up listening to a lot of people not happy with the system back home. With the system, there was a lot of corruption, there was a lot of systems not working. Even my parents used to complain a lot about the country. It's so sad because we are losing a lot of youth, we are losing a lot of manpower. I mean, the people that have left are enough when you want to equate it to the actual manpower we need to actually fix the country. But because we have bad leadership, we have leaders that do not really want to listen to the voice of the people, leaders that don't really want to do what is expected of them in that position of authority and in a position of power, we find that their interest is not necessarily resonating with the needs of the people. I used to come to the UK a lot as a child for summer holidays, and at that time my family was not really interested in this Japa train. In fact, Nigeria breaks my heart. There was a time where 1 naira was equals to $1, and the pound was equal to the naira. And at that time, I remember my mom telling me that a ticket from the UK to Nigeria would cost about 500, 600 naira. We had our own national carrier back then, Nigeria Airways, and everything has just fallen. Everything has just broken to pieces and disintegrated. I mean, when you hear these stories, you actually don't believe that was it really true, because 500 naira now in Nigeria cannot even buy a loaf of bread. At that time, a lot of Nigerians were not interested in fleeing the country or leaving the country. A lot of people were making it back home. They were doing their thing. When I calculate my dad's age, when he was at the peak of his career, I have passed that age and I don't even have a portion of what my dad managed to acquire at his age. And the same goes for a few cousins of mine. It's so heartbreaking that the country has squeezed us to the point where people have lost hope. People are leaving the country. People don't have, they're literally fleeing the country, not just to the Western world, but to different parts of the world. And this has a negative impact on the economy. It has a negative impact on the mental health of the people that are even Japan and even the people that are being left behind. So after I finished university, so this is my own story. Nigeria happens to a lot of us, unfortunately. So when I finished university, I would come here to visit my older ones, my mom. I used to travel a lot between Nigeria and the UK. Even back then, when I would come, I would buy things to take back home to sell. I managed to create a small business for myself. While when I go back to Nigeria, I will be looking for a job. I was in the job market, putting out my CV and all of that. And it got to a point where I got a job a year and a half after I graduated, and the pay at the time was not bad. I had a good job, and I remember I was so excited. I still had stock from some of the things I was selling, so I was fine. In fact, during that season, this was obviously when I graduated and I was an adult and I understood everything that was going on. A lot of people were moving back home. So this was around 2009. A lot of people were moving back home. People were coming back to establish businesses. The SME industry was booming. Even at that time, when I'd finished selling my stock, even while I was working, I actually set up my own skincare line and I was making body scrubs. Basically, there's a company in the UK called The Body Shop. They make skincare products around natural ingredients, skincare products for women, using natural ingredients, so they have the most amazing smelling body scrubs. I'd use them. My mom had always bought Body Shop when we were little. I'd grown accustomed to the brand. Even when I would come to the UK on holidays, I would buy some of the products. I would use them and it would leave my skin smelling so refreshing, so amazing. So I decided to create that concept in Nigeria at the time. And at that time, this wasn't when people started using cream and bleaching up and down. This was early days before they changed organic skincare to bleaching. There was no one for me to even understudy because nobody was really doing that at the time. In fact, when I look back now, the only person that I could even Google and search and anything around natural skincare, healthcare would come up was Quincy at the time. She had a business on Awolowo Road, somewhere in Ikoyi. So I started my skincare brand and I was quite happy. I was quite content. I wasn't even married. I was single and I was quite happy with the way the country was going. Yes, people were still complaining. Yes, we still had corrupt leaders. Yes, systems were still not working appropriately. But there was a certain level of stability at that time that made me comfortable as a person. And also a few of my friends were moving back. So even when you hear your friend is moving back, it sort of encourages you that, let's stick together and do the right thing. So fast forward a few years later, maybe about a couple of years later, not even up to 2 years, I got married and I started having kids. And I think that's when the light bulb now began to blink. At that time, a lot of my friends, a lot of my peers, a lot of people were going to America to have their children. And I remember having that discussion with my husband and we looked at it and we said, you know what? So the thing is now I got married to someone from outside of Nigeria. My husband is from the southern part of Africa. So he didn't really, coming from a totally different country, with a totally different mindset, even though that Japa, the Japa is also Japaing in their country. He really didn't see the need, or he didn't really see where I was going when I was trying to explain to him that a lot of my peers, even my friends that had married before me, people were traveling abroad to have their children. Even my older sister at the time had her children abroad. So I was trying to follow in those footsteps. But he didn't really quite get where I was coming from. So before we were talking back and forth, I had got into my second trimester and we hadn't put any of the concrete plans in place. And this is how that opportunity went. And I had my first child in Nigeria. At that time, my husband was very optimistic about Africa as a whole. He was even happy to be in Nigeria because opportunities that he wasn't even getting at home, he was getting it in Nigeria as an expatriate, and opportunities that we could not get at home, he was able to get it because of his line of work. So at that point, I was comfortable. I said, okay, let me stay and build my country. When the children started coming, that was when the thing now hit me differently. And I can authoritatively tell you, there was a friend of mine that traveled once, and she said on the flight out of Nigeria that she had never seen so many young families on board. It hits you differently when you have children, to be honest, because you are now going to be dealing with a situation that is so real. It actually scares. It's scary to feel like you are trapped in a system that doesn't work, and your kids are going to follow suit in this system that has not worked for you, and you don't know how bad it might be in their time. So my perception slowly started shifting when I started seeing the kids. We started going through with the educational system, so many gaps, so many glitches. A lot of Africans are running out of Africa, especially in specific hotspots in Africa, Nigeria being one of them, because of opportunities, opportunities that they find abroad. They cannot find these opportunities in Nigeria, unfortunately. And it is causing a lot of skilled hands to leave the country. And it's scary because a lot of people are moving with true information, with false information. Some people are migrating legally, some people are migrating illegally. There's like a scramble out of the country because people are not happy with the system of things. People are not happy with the way the country is going. It has gone from bad to worse. I mean, when you put on the TV, when you read on the articles and you follow the news trend and you see how inflation has more than doubled, it makes you so sad. Like, is this country regressional? I was watching a video of Tayo Aina. He's a YouTuber, and he had come to the UK and he was interviewing people in his documentary about this whole Japa Syndrome. And when you listen to the reason why these people left, the people who was interviewing, it was very heartbreaking because it resonated deep within me. I was the last in my family to migrate because a part of me wanted to stay and rebuild Nigeria, or at least contribute to rebuilding the country. At that time, when a lot of people moved back, shortly after, a few years after, there was a migration out. People were moving out, people were moving back to where they were coming from. Businesses were packing up, businesses were folding up. My business also being one of those businesses packed up, and I struggled to try to hold on to my business, but it didn't work out. I was even doing training women on how to make skincare products using natural everyday ingredients that we find in Nigeria that are growing in abundance, even using palm oil, to create a scrub, using palm oil to make soap. The business packed up, and it was so heartbreaking for me because I had invested a lot into staying back home. My parents were alive at the time, and I was the only child in Nigeria, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. Like, everybody had gone, okay, let me be closer to them in case of any emergencies, And when my dad passed, my parents passed, my mom and my dad. But when my dad passed, I think something in me became irreparably broken about Nigeria, because my dad, I'm not bigger than my father, and my dad passed without getting his compensation, which we as a family had waited for over 30 years, and it never happened. And I couldn't quite. It's so sad because a lot of the times people are moving to these countries without really knowing what to expect on the other side. The grass is not greener on the other side, unfortunately. A few people would have had it good, when they relocate, maybe expatriates, that their companies, they're fully funding them, and they are paying everything for them, from their tickets to their accommodation upon arrival, all of that. Those are, I feel, are exceptions to the general rule. A lot of people pack up and sell and go without really knowing what to expect on the other side. A lot of people go through challenges. I mean, it takes 2 to 3 years for the average family to really settle and integrate themselves in any country that they move into. You're going to a new country where you might not necessarily have the support system that you had back home, be it in form of your parents, your relatives, friends, and family members. You might not have that where you're going. So it's like being put in the deep end where you have to find a way for yourself. And so it makes me so sad that Nigeria is not moving at a pace that can really help to empower our youths, that can really help to rebuild the country. I remember when I started vlogging, and then we were just relocated back from Zimbabwe, because we had moved to Zimbabwe for some time, which didn't really, it didn't really work out. And when I started vlogging, I was vlogging about places in Lagos, just sort of being like a brand ambassador for Lagos in my own little way, because I grew up in Lagos and I really do enjoy Lagos. Obviously, some parts, not all the parts here. So I remember some people would put comments on my videos, slagging Nigeria, abusing the country, insulting the country. And I remember I used to stand up for the country and say, no, if all of us leave, who will turn the lights off? If all of us leave, who is going to repair the country? And most of the people who were leaving these comments were living in the diaspora. I remember I would defend the country and say, no, it is not all bad. Things are going to get better. We all have to just do our work. So now I'm not saying that everybody should leave Nigeria. No, this is my own story. And these are my reasons why I decided to seek greener pastures and seek better opportunities for myself as well as my family. In Nigeria, it was difficult because looking for a job, the bank, when I sent my CV to my friend's company, they just told me point blank that, madam, you are too old. It was like, you are too old without any recommendations. I mean, over here, they have that willingness to train you. They have that willingness to make you are not, I mean, when I got my job here, I was so over the moon. There's that opportunity to train, retrain, and retrain. They have this thing where even if you are 60 and you want to work, you can work, because the system doesn't, they have a high level of equality and diversity where you are not being judged for your age, for your race, at least in the work sector, where you are not being judged for your employment wise. You are not going to be judged for your age, for your race, and all of that. So it's quite sad that the country is not really moving forward. And as I said, I was the last to leave in my family. I had high hopes for the country until it started giving me blues. My heart and my prayer goes to Nigeria as a country, and I pray that we can reclaim some of our past glory, so at least it can encourage a lot of us outside to even begin to come back home and contribute into fostering a stronger society, a stronger economy. But a lot of Africans moved for greener pastures because the country was not serving them in a way that would foster independence, in a way that would foster prosperity, in a way that would foster security and protection for their lives, property, as well as their children. So this Japa thing started again. We can see different seasons that happened. Even after the UAE brain drain, there were different seasons that were coming, different seasons that were happening where people were leaving. NSAS was one of them, where people were so heartbroken. Even before NSAS, the Boko Haram situation affected people to the point where a lot of people started fleeing the country, because once your life is at risk, you can't even think straight. You cannot live. You cannot thrive. You cannot be creative. You cannot contribute to the society. You can only contribute when you are alive. So people's lives were at risk. People started leaving. NSAS happened. A lot of people were at risk. People died from that situation, and people started leaving. So it's just so sad. And as I said, I hope the country gets to a point where people will be encouraged to move back. Moving out of the country is not a guarantee for success. A lot of people that have moved are stuck. A lot of people that have moved have not really progressed. So it is not a one size fits all that everybody that will come will succeed. No, it's just that people are so scared. It's like when you are so scared of where you are that you don't really care where you're going, or you're not really thinking in depth if that place will really prosper you in a way that you want to be prosperous. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and this video is just talking about the Japa Syndrome that's happening in Nigeria. We pray for a time where things will get better, where people can come back home, where people can be free. It's like being on exile when you have a country that deep in your heart you know you love, but it has not really served love for you. So until I come your way again, signing off and out. Do take care of yourself.